Chapter 6. It was easy to busy herself in her kitchen, to lose thoughts and images in the routine of filling kettles and teapots, of slicing and laying out cakes, stacking scones in baskets and setting out butter and jam. Although it was early for tea, Georgie Fraser's message had pulled the guests back from their activities. Martin Davis's mobile number had been on his registration form, and she had sent a text to him, hoping that he would have Joe Ingalls with him. The two of them had arrived just after the archaeologists and were now sitting with them at the same table that they had taken at breakfast. She noticed it with most guests. Whichever table they first ate at was theirs for the duration of their stay, unless some unwitting newcomer poached it, in which case there were usually sly looks and mutterings under the breath. D.C. Corby had accompanied Marianne down from the hill once the first CID team had arrived from Shrewsbury, and offered help, but taken no offence when she refused. Fraser had told the junior officer to wait at the bunkhouse. There was no point in her slogging all the way back up Perkins Beach, and if she played her cards right, she might get some late lunch. Corby had drunk several cups of tea, and Marianne had made her a ham and cheese sandwich while Corby filled her in on the team. "We'll probably get DCI Pitbull. He's always getting parachuted into Telford when they have some county line thing going down." "Pitbull?" Marianne had asked, wondering whether she'd misheard. "That's just what the lads call him. He's Pickthall, really. You know what it's like in CID. All nicknames and banter. Boys will be boys and all that. Most of the time I get jokes about trousers." "Trousers?" "You know, Corby trouser press, in hotel rooms and that." "Oh." Corby was undemanding company, though Marianne would have preferred to be alone. Most of the time she was required to give only one-word answers or prompts while the constable chatted away. She liked Fraser, apparently. "Never worked with anyone like her before. But she's all right. Not as weird as you'd think, and a good copper. Used to be something big in the Met, apparently." Donald, of course, poked his head around the kitchen door when he arrived back at the bunkhouse. "Everything all right?" "Fine." His concern apparently prompted him to come in, though she did her best not to sound welcoming. "Do you need a hand? It's earlier than usual, bit of a change to the routine. Oh, sorry." He started when he caught sight of D.C. Corby. "Didn't know anyone was here." "Don't mind me," Corby said. "And I've offered help too. Marianne says she's better on her own." Her phone beeped and she checked it, then got to her feet, straightening her trousers which had ridden up and creased around her thighs. Marianne thought inconsequentially of the trouser press. "I'd round up that lot who went for showers." The Woggle trainees, cold from the river. "The DI's on her way." Donald waved her out, but made no move to follow. "Everything's under control, Donald. You sit down with your flock, keep them where they should be." Instead, he leaned back against the counter, his battered hat in his hands. She considered spouting health and safety regs at him, but there seemed little point since D.C. Corby had just been breaking them. She refilled the larger kettle and set it back on the Rayburn. "You look a bit tired," he said. "Trouble sleeping last night?" "I'm fine." Could the man not take a hint? He watched her for a little longer, twisting the brim of his hat. For something to do, Marianne fetched the trays of lentil bake from the fridge and checked the temperature of the lower oven. It was too early to put them in, but they could sit for a bit while the oven came up to heat. "Do you know what this is all about, then?" In her mind, she ran through what Fraser had told her to say and felt no compunction about lying to him. He would find out soon enough. "Only that something's turned up and they need to talk to everyone. I think a team's come in from Worcester, their HQ." "So, it's serious then? Something must have happened, don't you think?" One or two strands of control, carefully held in place all day, snapped, and she set the tray down with a bang. "Donald, please! I know no more than you!" A flicker of shock crossed his genial face, and guilt stabbed at her. One day she would have to tell him he just wasn't her type. 3 years of gentle discouragement hadn't worked, and she liked him. He was a friend as far as she had friends. "Please go back into the other room. You can help by taking things in through the hatch. Lay out the cakes nicely." He went, raising an eyebrow at her in a way that assumed more of a relationship between them than there was. Through the hatch came the drone of voices, hushed in speculation, but rising in waves whenever they forgot the imminent arrival of the police. It seemed they had their collective ears on alert for whenever there was a sound outside, even when it was just Marianne going out to feed the dogs. Now they heard wheels on gravel and silence fell, to be followed by a faint buzz like bees in a hive. From her vantage point at the kitchen window, Marianne saw Georgie Fraser's police Land Rover pull into a space between the archaeology vehicles. Fraser got out, followed by 2 men. The smaller was South Asian, Indian or Bangladeshi perhaps. Spare and lean, late 20s. His police-issue walking boots looked incongruous with a well-cut, slim-legged suit. The older man was big, not quite Roger's size, but tall and carrying a few extra pounds, late 40s with dark, thinning hair like a monk's tonsure. His suit was baggy and crumpled as though he'd slept in it, and there were puffy bags under his eyes. A drinker. Marianne knew one when she saw one. Before they could knock, she went to open the door, aware of the pin-drop hush in the dining room. "Hello," she said, like a hostess welcoming favoured guests. "You all look like you could do with a cup of tea." Georgie Fraser turned and smiled. Strands of hair had escaped her neat bun and she smoothed them away from her face. Marianne noticed the well-manicured hands, broad-knuckled and on the large side, the long nails immaculate despite spending half the day up on the hill. Fraser introduced her to D.S. Chowdhury and DCI Pickthall.
"Tea would be great," Pickthall said. "Not a lot of refreshment places up on that moor."
He had a strong northern accent, Lancashire perhaps, north of Liverpool anyway. "I don't suppose there's any of that banana bread going," Georgie Fraser said. "I've been singing your baking praises all the way down from the hill." "Carrot cake today," Marianne said, feeling as though she was acting in a play. "Or scones, if you'd rather. Go through, I need to top up the teapots." Watching the action through the hatch was a little like viewing an ancient television set, well before the days of flat screens. The guests shifted in their chairs, turning to face the officers like well-mannered students in a classroom. Unlike the day before, all were present, and with no chairs to spare, the police stood, Chowdhury near the door, leaving Pickthall and Fraser to front the operation while Corby fetched tea for them. Fraser spoke first. "Thank you all for leaving your activities and coming back here so promptly. We're sorry to have kept you waiting." She smiled and thanked Corby for the mug that she set on the counter beside her. "I'm also sorry to have to tell you that we've located the young woman for whom we were searching yesterday. Her body was found earlier today, up at the top of the valley. At the Devil's Pool, if you know where that is." Heads turned neighbour to neighbour. A flutter of whispers and questioning looks exchanged. Marianne saw Russell, the Woggle student, take Lucy's hand and kiss her fingertips. The girl, usually the picture of health, looked shocked and strained. "DCI Pickthall is from the Serious Crime Unit, and he will be the senior investigating officer. He'd like to talk to all of you now." Roger raised a hand. "So you're not the SIO?" Maybe he thought the abbreviation made him sound cool, as though a police investigation was nothing new to him. "Sadly not." Georgie Fraser gave her usual swift smile. "I head up the Rural Crime Unit. Stolen tractors and sheep rustling. Suspicious death comes under the auspices of serious crime." "You don't think it was an accident, then?" That was Wiltshire Sam. He was out of Marianne's line of sight, but she recognised the strong West Country accent. "And we are all being treated as suspects?" Dr. Ajay was sitting with Wiltshire Sam. Marianne could only see her arm, fine-boned fingers drumming out a silent pattern on the table. DCI Pickthall stepped forward and nodded to Fraser, signalling that he was taking over. "Not suspects, but witnesses. Valuable witnesses," he said. His voice was deep and reassuring, threaded through with fatigue and cigarettes. "All of you were out on the hills on the day that the young woman was last seen. It's likely that one of you saw something that might help with our inquiries, even if you weren't aware of anything unusual at the time." "A lot of people were on the hill that day," Roger said, his tone belligerent. "You're questioning all of them too, are you?" The DCI sighed through his nose and picked up a scone that Corby had buttered for him. He chewed for a moment, letting Roger's question hang in the air until a thin layer of embarrassment settled over the room. When his mouth was empty, he took a gulp of tea. "We are
Of course, trying to contact everybody who was walking out on the Stiperstones range on Wednesday. But we're reliant on members of the public coming forward in response to announcements, and it takes time for word to filter through. Those of you staying here had the greatest chance of seeing something. Remember, the young woman was last seen running towards this place. Beside the farm down the lane, there are no other houses on this part of the hill.
He reached into his inside pocket and drew out his phone. Marianne found herself watching D.I. Fraser, wondering what it must be like to step aside to accommodate a more senior colleague when you had done all the preliminary work. Having finished her carrot cake, Fraser was checking her nails, picking at what Marianne supposed was a minuscule chip in the varnish. The detective looked up and caught her eye through the hatch. She flashed a smile. Marianne glanced down, embarrassed at being caught watching.
"I have a photograph of the young woman here," the DCI said. "Now I appreciate that some of you might find it distressing to look at, but we need to try to give her a name. Like as not, none of you knows her, but there's a chance someone might recognise her. Her face might jog your memory from Wednesday afternoon, and then we can get this investigation moving."
D.S. Chowdhury also took out his phone and passed it around while Corby took the DCI's. Pitbull. Oh Lord, now Marianne couldn't help thinking of him like that. Fielded questions, while Fraser seemed engaged watching the faces of those who were looking at the photograph. Marianne wondered if any of the guests had noticed that she wasn't being asked to look at the unnamed girl. She was grateful that Fraser hadn't mentioned that it was she who'd found the body. All the intrusive questions, concern masquerading as gossip hunger, would have been unbearable. She still hadn't seen the girl's face. Only a fleeting impression from the car park at Titterston Clee when she'd done her best not to stare at the arguing couple as she passed them. Now she wished she had gazed and gazed, imprinted every detail in her memory so that she would have something useful to help uncover what had happened to her. There had been nothing distinctive about the girl's companion. A dark coat, the hood pulled up against the wind, neither tall nor short. Maybe it hadn't even been a man. She had just assumed it to be a man because they seemed to her to be a couple. Friends didn't argue with such intensity. The companion had been taller than the girl in the blue coat, true, and broader of shoulder, but plenty of women were lean and angular just as plenty of men were soft and rounded. There was more to it than build. Movement, gesture. Perhaps that was why she had assumed it was a man. The gestures, aggressive, forceful, used to getting their own way.
"Right."
The DCI clapped his hands together, bringing the meeting back to order. Another man used to getting his own way. No one had admitted to recognising the photo. Lucy and one of the other Woggle girls were crying quietly, and Dr. Ajayi had her arm around Claire, the Trustafarian. Most simply looked embarrassed, or even angry that they had been made to view a photograph of a dead face.
"My team is based in Worcester, and will be conducting the investigation from HQ, the DCI said. D.I. Fraser and DC Corbett will take detailed statements from all of you, and based on those, I'll decide who we need to interview further. Any of you planning to leave soon?"
Heads swivelled as the guests checked the room for raised hands. The archaeologists would of course be there until September, barring the odd day off, and the Woggles still had another 5 days. Martin Davis coughed sheepishly into the silence.
We were thinking of heading out tomorrow."
Joe Ingalls sat up a little straighter in his chair and gave his friend a slow look.
"Is that right?"
"Weren't we?"
"You might have been."
A flicker of irritation crossed Fraser's face and the DCI frowned. Martin smiled ruefully and apologised. Joe Ingalls' face was like a mask.
"D.I. Fraser will also be our liaison with you," Pitbull said. "I'll leave my details on your notice board, but if you have anything to tell us, your best plan's to go through the DI. Understood?"
There was a murmur of assent. Marianne half expected Roger to take some sort of leader role, but it was Donnell who stood up and wished the DCI all the best for a speedy resolution.
"I assume we can get on with our dig tomorrow." "Of course. This side of Perkins Beach will be off limits for a day or two, but as I understand it, your dig's on the other hill."
D.I. Fraser knocked on the kitchen door as Donnell followed the DCI out into the entrance hall. Marianne thought how tired she looked, but the deep-set eyes still burned bright. She was interesting, looking out on the world with wry amusement. Marianne considered that, had they met under different circumstances, she would have liked to get to know her, to talk and ask questions, drink coffee and chew the fat. Something told her that the conversation would be easy.
Would you be willing to squeeze 2 more in for your evening meal?
DC Corby and I will be here until late, I imagine. Of course. Lentil and vegetable bake? Fraser laughed. I'm not big on vegetables, but right now I'd eat anything and be grateful. Thank you. How are you doing? She added. The usual answer was on the tip of Marianne's tongue, a bright and brisk, I'm fine. Instead, she attempted to smile that felt more like a grimace. I'll be glad when the day's over and I can go home. Fraser nodded.
We'll get things done as efficiently as possible. Ah, the boss calls.
DCI Pitbull's deep Lancashire tones echoed around the entrance hall, and Fraser let the door swing shut behind her as she went out. It caught on the leg of the chair Corby had been using and didn't quite close. Marianne heard the DCI's words to Fraser.
You handle things this end, then. Meanwhile, we'll be doing the stuff that matters. Trawling data, making phone calls, and wading through paperwork.
She didn't hear Fraser's reply, only low, amused tones with a Scottish lilt. DCI Pitbull laughed.
There's a performative element to policing, so let's give the locals what they want. Murders aren't solved by DI Clever Clogs and his sidekick Grumpy, but that's what people expect. Somebody in that room saw something. Probability says so. It's your job to get it out of them.
The interviews were well underway by the time Alice arrived to help with the evening meal. DC Corby had taken the laundry room as her base, and D.I. Fraser was in the large walk-in pantry. Marianne's office was barely big enough for a desk. Macabre as the day had been, it made Marianne smile to think of the well-groomed inspector earnestly probing people's recollections, surrounded by drums of vegetable oil and catering-sized bags of flour and pasta. Alice was laying tables in the dining room, and Marianne stacking the tea things in the dishwasher, when a sob from the lobby behind the kitchen made her start. Lucy, the woggle trainee, stood outside the pantry door, her hands over her face. Lucy? The girl emitted more strangled sobs, gasping for breath. Marianne put down the stack of bowls she was holding and went to her. When she laid a hand on the girl's arm, Lucy turned and crumpled. She was a little taller than Marianne, and it couldn't have been comfortable for her to bury her head in Marianne's shoulder. Marianne put her arms around her and patted her back, just as the pantry door opened and Fraser looked out. She raised her eyebrows and said,
Are we?
We're fine. Marianne guided Lucy towards the kitchen. Do you know where Russell is? At his name, Lucy trembled, and garbled words spilled from her mouth. Fraser answered for her.
I was just about to get him. He's next on my list.
Well, we'll just have a sit down for a minute. She thought of suggesting fetching Roger, but his bluff brand of pull-your-socks-up motivation was hardly likely to help. While the DI went to find her next victim, an unconscious word choice in Marianne's mind, she installed Lucy in the chair left by DC Corby and made sure the hatch was closed to give them privacy. Then she fetched the girl a glass of water and went on loading the dishwasher. Tissue? Lucy gulped. There was a need of one for sure. Marianne tore a piece of kitchen paper from the roll and handed it to her with an apology that it was the best she could do. When the girl's sobs had calmed a little, she said, Do you want to tell me about it? More nods and sniffs. It was an astonishing transformation. Until D.I. Fraser's announcement of the discovery of the body, Lucy had been nothing but sunshine. Starry-eyed, yes, but also cheerful, competent, helpful around the bunkhouse, keeping the other trainees tidy. Now she looked as though she'd been through a mangle. I think I know who she was. Lucy gulped the words out, punctuated with gasps of breath. It wasn't what Marianne had been expecting. I met her at a teacher training thing. You know, one of those county networking days. Marianne didn't know, but nodded anyway. Her name was Anna. We were in the same group. When I saw the photo, I didn't. And then, just now, when I was talking to the inspector, I remembered. She began to cry again. Anna. Marianne was pleased to have a name for the girl. Since she had found her floating face down in the water, it had felt wrong to think of her only as the girl in the blue coat. Disrespectful. A name gave a chance of resolution. An answer.